Welcome to Chapter 9, The Infrastructure Choice. Zephyros has spent 56,000 years building monuments. Now he's built something different, an entire city quarter optimized for enhanced humans. Every doorway, every control, every system, 33% more efficient than baseline infrastructure. He calls it architectural excellence. Mira calls it discrimination built into geography. This is the story of how design choices become political choices, and how optimization can exclude just as effectively as walls. Let's begin. Chapter 9, The Infrastructure Choice. 2833 BCE, 1 year after the massacre. Part 1, Acts 1 and 2. Act 1, The Segregation by Design. Enhanced Quarter, Uruk, morning. The water sang. Zephyros stood in the central plaza of Uruk's enhanced quarter, listening to advanced hydraulic systems hum with precision mathematics made physical. Around him, the morning routine of enhanced human civilization unfolded with unconscious grace, residents moving through spaces designed for their exact proportions, utilizing infrastructure optimized for their processing capabilities, living in architectural harmony he'd spent decades perfecting. This was his masterwork. Not the isolated monuments of Book 1, Göbekli Tepe, Karnak, Stonehenge, but a lived-in civilization where every design decision served human flourishing. Where architecture is enabled rather than constrained. Where building choices reflected an understanding of how physical space shapes social possibility. He'd learned so much since those early attempts at coordination networks and had gained humility through Göbekli Tepe's failure. Learned patience through Malta's centuries of operation. Learned persistence through Karnak's eventual breakthrough. And learned or thought he'd learned how to build for human needs rather than a mortal demonstration. The enhanced quarter proved it. Every doorway is calculated for the 95th percentile enhanced height, plus comfortable clearance. Every stairwell is designed with riser height and tread depth optimized for enhanced stride biomechanics. Every lighting fixture is positioned to maximize visual acuity at the optimal angle and intensity. Every control interface requiring processing speed that enhanced cognition could comfortably manage, but that challenged baseline capacity. Subtle optimizations. Nothing obvious. Nothing that screamed this is for enhanced humans only. Just better. More efficient. More comfortable. More responsive to the capabilities of the population it served. Ishara emerged from her residence, astronomical instruments already in hand for morning calculations. She smiled at Zephyros, 48 years old now, still decades from middle age by enhanced standards, her mathematician's mind as sharp as the day Talia had enhanced her bloodline. The water pressure is perfect today, she said, genuine appreciation in her voice. I timed my morning ablutions, 12 minutes for a complete hygiene routine. The baseline quarter systems take 18 minutes to achieve the same result. Your infrastructure makes daily life 33% more efficient. Zephyros felt pride at the recognition. 33% efficiency gain from thoughtful design. That was architecture serving its highest purpose, enabling capability, reducing friction, allowing people to spend time on meaningful activities rather than struggling with infrastructure. The pressure differential is calculated for enhanced perception of temperature variation, he explained, pleased to discuss technical details with someone whose cognition could appreciate them. Baseline systems use fixed pressure as functional but imprecise. Enhanced systems adjust in real time based on usage patterns, ambient temperature, and predicted demand across the distribution network. Requires continuous processing of 17 variables, recalculation every 40 seconds, but produces optimal performance. Can baseline engineers maintain it? Ishara asked, the question carrying professional curiosity rather than concern. They don't need to, Zephyros replied. The system is self-regulating. Once established, it requires minimal intervention. Baseline communities have their own infrastructure, appropriate for their maintenance capabilities. Appropriate. The word carried no condescension in his mind. Different populations needed different designs. That was understanding human diversity, not creating hierarchy. Enhanced humans could process complexity, whereas baseline humans found it overwhelming. Building infrastructure that matched each population's capabilities wasn't discrimination, it was optimization for actual users rather than theoretical equality. He walked through the quarter as enhanced residents began their day. A municipal building with elegant proportions, ceiling height calculated for enhanced spatial perception comfort. A community workshop with tool interfaces requiring enhanced processing speed to operate safely, preventing accidents that slower baseline reflexes might experience. A public bath with temperature control systems using mathematical optimization, which baseline engineers found impenetrably complex, but enhanced engineers understood intuitively. Everything serving the population it was designed for. Everything is optimized for actual user capabilities rather than abstract principles of universal access, proving that thoughtful architecture enabled human flourishing when the builder understood human capabilities. Ninlil joined him near the Water Distribution Control Center. Her domain is the engineer who'd helped implement Zephyros's designs across Uruk's infrastructure. At 54, gray threading through hair that would remain mostly dark for another century, she embodied the enhanced human integration of cognitive sophistication with practical application. I finished the flow optimization for the Eastern expansion, she said, pulling out calculations that filled 3 clay tablets with density that would overwhelm baseline engineers. Pressure curves modeling 17 nodes, accounting for elevation changes, temperature variation, seasonal demand fluctuation, maintenance accessibility, and expansion potential. Implementation should achieve 92% theoretical efficiency. Zephyros examined the calculations with appreciation for expertise meeting ambition. Ninlil had processed variables in hours that would take baseline engineering teams weeks to approximate. This was an enhanced capability serving community needs, utilizing biological advantage to produce better outcomes for everyone served by infrastructure. The baseline quarter expansion? He asked. Ninlil's expression shifted slightly. Using the standard fixed pressure distribution model. Less efficient but maintainable by their engineering capacity. Baseline teams can handle installation and repairs without requiring enhanced mathematical processing. That's appropriate design, Zephyros said. Infrastructure matching maintenance capability. No dependency on enhanced expertise for their daily functioning. He believed it. Believed he was building equity through appropriate differentiation and an enhanced quarter with optimal infrastructure, allowing residents to maintain it. Baseline quarter is getting functional infrastructure because baseline residents can maintain it, ensuring a fair distribution of design effort, matching each community's capabilities. The morning sun climbed higher as Zephyros continued his inspection. The enhanced quarter woke to another day of living with infrastructure that anticipated needs, responded to patterns, and operated with a precision that felt natural to enhance perception but would overwhelm baseline cognitive processing. Beautiful. Efficient. Optimal. And he was proud. Baseline quarter, Uruk, late morning. The baseline quarter felt different. Not obviously worse, Zephyros had ensured basic quality standards across all Uruk infrastructure. Clean water. Adequate drainage. Functional lighting. Structural integrity. Every neighborhood receives infrastructure sufficient for human flourishing, according to the basic standards set by the partnership councils. But walking through the baseline quarter after experiencing the enhanced quarter revealed contrasts that architectural training made impossible to ignore. Doorways are slightly lower, not dangerously so, but requiring enhanced residents to duck slightly, a reminder of the difference. Stairwells with riser spacing that felt oddly proportioned to enhance biomechanics, breaking walking rhythm in ways enhanced bodies noticed, even if enhanced minds dismissed as a minor inconvenience. Lighting was positioned to assess baseline visual acuity rather than to enhance precision, creating shadows that were found distracting to perception. Everything functional. Nothing optimal. The water systems, in particular, revealed the difference. Zephyros watched a baseline woman, maybe 35 years old, carrying 2 children through morning routines, struggle briefly with pressure inconsistency in the public fountain. Not a system failure. Just imprecision. The water flow stuttered slightly as demand shifted, pressure dropping momentarily before stabilizing at a functional level, the entire sequence taking perhaps 3 seconds longer than it would in the enhanced quarter self-regulating systems. She didn't complain. Probably didn't even notice consciously. This was her standard infrastructure that worked but demanded patience, attention, and adjustment to imperfections that optimal systems eliminated. Sky Builder. Zephyros turned. A baseline engineer approached Doggin, maybe 40 years old, responsible for maintaining the baseline quarter's water infrastructure. His hands showed the calluses of physical labor that engineers avoided through more sophisticated control mechanisms. His face carried the premature aging that 35 years of baseline metabolism produced, making him look nearly as old as Ishara despite being 7 years younger. The eastern distribution node is experiencing pressure variations, Dagan said, his tone respectful but carrying the wariness of someone fighting continuous infrastructure problems. I've adjusted the flow valves 3 times this week, but optimal balance is difficult. The system wants constant recalibration that I don't have the processing capacity to calculate while also managing maintenance across 6 other nodes. Zephyros examined the node in question, a junction point where 3 water channels converged, requiring pressure balancing that enhanced systems handled through real-time calculation. Still, baseline systems are managed through physical valve adjustment. The calculations existed in tables Dagan consulted, but applying them required testing, adjustment, retesting, and correction, an iterative process where enhanced engineers would simply calculate optimal settings directly. Have you considered the seasonal demand variation? Zephyros asked, then realized immediately the question was unfair. Dagan was managing the present function, not optimizing across temporal variables that required predictive modeling beyond baseline cognitive bandwidth. I adjust based on what I observe, Dagan admitted, the slight hesitation revealing awareness that he wasn't managing the system the way it was designed to be managed. When pressure drops, I adjust. When it's excessive, I compensate. I know there are better methods. Optimization tables you provided include seasonal factors, but applying 17 variable calculations while managing daily operations across the quarter is beyond my processing capability. You're doing well, Zephyros said, meaning it sincerely. Dagan was managing infrastructure requiring cognitive capacity he didn't possess, achieving functional results through dedication that substituted for capability. The baseline quarter has reliable water service. That's what matters. But walking away, Zephyros felt discomfort he couldn't quite articulate. Dagan is working harder to achieve functional results that the engineers achieved more easily. The baseline quarter received competent maintenance, keeping infrastructure operational, while the enhanced quarter received optimization, keeping infrastructure perfect. Appropriate differentiation? Or something else? The question followed him through the rest of the baseline quarter inspection. Every interaction, every observation, every subtle difference between enhanced and baseline infrastructure accumulated in his architect's consciousness like pressure building in poorly balanced distribution systems. A mother trying to light oil lamps in her home, the lighting system's manual controls needing attention, enhanced residents' unconscious giving. Still, baseline residents experienced it as a constant, small effort. A workshop where tool interfaces designed for enhanced processing speed meant baseline craftspeople worked more slowly, sacrificing either speed or safety because the tools assumed cognitive capacity they didn't possess. A drainage system designed for simplified maintenance that experienced periodic blockages, baseline engineers could manage, but enhanced engineers would have recognized it as suboptimal from the specification stage. Nothing catastrophic. Everything functional. But everywhere, baseline residents worked harder, accepting imperfection as usual, living with infrastructure that served them adequately, while their enhanced neighbors lived with infrastructure that served them excellently. It's better than what their ancestors had, Prometheus said, appearing beside Zephyros as the immortal walked between quarters. Agricultural communities 50 years ago had no water distribution systems, no controlled lighting, no sophisticated drainage. What you've built is a generous improvement over baseline human infrastructure capabilities. Generous compared to their past, Zephyros replied slowly, the discomfort crystallizing into recognition he didn't want to acknowledge. Inferior compared to what I built for enhanced humans. I'm proud of the optimal infrastructure in the enhanced quarter and satisfied with the functional infrastructure in the baseline quarter. That difference feels wrong. But I don't know why. Because you're realizing building choices are political choices, Sophia said, joining them at the boundary between quarters, a subtle line marked only by gradual changes in infrastructure quality that residents experienced without necessarily recognizing. Enhanced quarter gets infrastructure optimized for enhanced capabilities. The baseline quarter constrains infrastructure by baseline limitations. The difference inscribes hierarchy into geography. Or it inscribes appropriate design into architecture, Prometheus countered, his voice carrying the same logic Zephyros had used to justify his decisions. Different users need different systems. Building the same infrastructure for populations with different capabilities isn't equity, it's refusing to acknowledge reality. Build advanced systems for enhanced users, and they flourish with infrastructure enabling their capabilities, Sophia said. Build basic systems for baseline users, and they're constrained by infrastructure, limiting their participation. Either way, the builder chooses winners. The three immortals stood at the invisible boundary, enhanced quarters sophisticated infrastructure on one side, baseline quarters functional infrastructure on the other, geography reflecting biology reflecting social hierarchy that partnership institutions claim to prevent, but architecture reinforced through every design decision. Tomorrow, Zephyros said quietly, the Partnership Council is debating universal design standards. Enhanced representatives will argue for optimizing service capability. Baseline representatives will argue for accessibility to enable participation. I'll need to choose which principle my architecture serves. He looked at the enhanced quarter he was so proud of, then at the baseline quarter he considered adequate, and felt the first recognition that pride and adequacy might both be failures of different kinds. Partnership Council Chamber, next morning. The debate had been building for 3 hours. Ishara stood at the center of the circular chamber, 64 years old now, baseline human aging making his mortality visible in ways his enhanced peers didn't experience, speaking with authority earned through 5 decades of leadership. Still, physical presence was limited by biological constraints that Zephyros' architecture couldn't address. The Sky Builder's infrastructure in the enhanced quarter is magnificent, Ishara said, his voice carrying through acoustics Zephyros had designed to ensure even quiet speech reached all positions. What are systems that self-regulate? Lighting that optimizes automatically. Controls that respond intuitively. I visited last month. The experience was remarkable. He paused, letting the praise settle before delivering the critique. It was also impossible for me to use it effectively. Doorways require constant awareness to avoid striking my head on the stairs with spacing that breaks my walking rhythm. Control interfaces responding to processing speed I couldn't match. I felt like a guest in infrastructure designed for people whose biology I didn't share. That's not exclusion, Enkidu countered from his seat near the document tables, 70 years old, Gilgamesh's grandson, enhanced human who'd grown up experiencing infrastructure advantage as usual rather than privilege. That's optimization for actual users. The enhanced quarter serves enhanced residents. Would you prefer we build suboptimal infrastructure to preserve your comfort when visiting? I prefer we build inclusive infrastructure that serves everyone, Ishara replied. Infrastructure enabling participation rather than inscribing hierarchy into geography. Shared infrastructure would constrain enhanced capabilities for the sake of baseline limitations, Ishara interjected, her mathematician's mind reducing complex social questions to an optimization problem. My morning ablutions take 12 minutes in the enhanced quarter, 18 minutes in the baseline quarter. Universal design forcing enhanced residents to accept baseline infrastructure performance means 6 minutes daily loss to a quality performance theater. Multiply across the population, and we lose thousands of person-hours annually to infrastructure that serves nobody optimally to serve everyone equally poorly. Person-hours measured against what standard? Asked Mira, a baseline engineer Zephyros hadn't met before, 40 years old, speaking with quiet authority that cut through efficiency arguments. Enhanced person-hours are worth more than baseline person-hours? 6 minutes of enhanced time matters more than baseline populations having access to the same infrastructure quality? 6 minutes of everyone's time, Ishara clarified. Universal design means enhanced populations lose efficiency to enable baseline participation in infrastructure that baseline populations still find challenging. Nobody's optimal use case is served. But everyone's access is enabled, Mira countered. Infrastructure, I can maintain. Systems I can repair. Controls I can operate. Spaces I can navigate comfortably. That's not serving nobody optimally, that's serving everybody adequately. The question is whether adequate participation matters more than optimal performance. Zephyros listened to the debate with growing discomfort, but didn't quite understand. Every argument Ishara and Enkidu made reflected the reasoning he'd used in design. Optimize for actual users. Match infrastructure to capability. Accept that different populations need different systems, appropriate differentiation rather than hierarchy. But Scherer's observation about feeling like a guest in infrastructure designed for different biology, and Mira's point about access mattering as much as performance, revealed dimensions Zephyros hadn't considered when choosing optimization over universality. "I need to speak," Zephyros said, his voice carrying through the chamber with the weight of a mortal presence interrupting human debate. The room quieted. Enhanced and baseline representatives turned to the architect whose designs had created the infrastructure they were debating, curious what the sky builder would say when forced to defend choices he'd made without recognizing they were political decisions. "When I designed the enhanced quarter," Zephyros began, "I optimized for the population who would use it. Doorways for enhanced height. Controls for enhanced processing speed. Systems for enhanced maintenance capability. I was proud of that work, proud of understanding user needs and designing infrastructure that served those needs excellently." He looked around the chamber. "When I designed the baseline quarter, I designed for different capabilities. Simpler systems. More forgiving tolerances. Infrastructure baseline engineers could maintain without requiring enhanced cognitive processing. I thought that was appropriate, different designs for different populations, each serving their actual capabilities rather than pretending capability differences don't exist." "That sounds reasonable," Enkidu said, looking for validation that his argument was correct. "It was optimization thinking applied to architecture," Zephyros continued, his tone shifting as recognition emerged through speech. "I asked, what infrastructure serves each population optimally? Enhanced populations get sophisticated systems because they can process sophistication. Baseline populations get simpler systems because they can maintain simplicity. Optimization for actual capability." "Exactly," Ishara agreed. "Design matching reality." "But I didn't ask the right question," Zephyros said, the admission feeling like architectural failure exposed. "I didn't ask, what infrastructure enables everyone to participate? I asked, what infrastructure serves each population's capabilities? Those questions produce a different architecture. Different geography. Different access." He gestured to the chamber itself. "This room is my work. I designed it for universal participation. Acoustics ensure everyone can hear. Sightlines ensure everyone can see. Seating arrangements ensure everyone can contribute equally. I could have designed it optimally for enhanced visual acuity and audio processing, sharper acoustics requiring enhanced hearing to appreciate, lighting position for enhanced visual precision, document tables arranged for enhanced processing speeds. That would have been optimal for enhanced users. But unusable for baseline participation," Scherer said, understanding Zephyros's recognition. "I built this chamber for universal access because partnership councils need universal participation," Zephyros confirmed. "But I built the enhanced quarter for optimal performance because I thought neighborhoods serving single populations could optimize for those populations. I was wrong. Geography, which enables enhanced participation while constraining baseline participation, makes partnership conditional on where you live. Physical space determines who can access what systems. Architecture inscribing hierarchy into daily life through 10,000 subtle design choices." The chamber was silent. Even Ishara's objections about the efficiency loss seemed to lose conviction as Zephyros's evolution played out in real time. "I propose we adopt universal design standards," Zephyros said, the words feeling like an admission of architectural failure and commitment to rebuild correctly. "All future infrastructure must be maintainable by baseline engineers. All controls must be operable at baseline processing speed. All spaces must be navigable by baseline bodies. Enhanced populations can still use sophisticated personal tools. But community infrastructure, water, lighting, buildings, systems serves everyone or serves no one. That sacrifices optimal performance," Enkidu objected. "It prioritizes universal participation," Zephyros replied. "And if I've learned anything from 53,000 years of building, it's that architecture shapes societies more than societies shape architecture. If I build hierarchy into geography, the partnership fails regardless of what councils declare. If I build universal access into geography, partnership has a chance to function despite biology arguing against it." Act 2, The Dependency Crisis. Regional city of Kish, 3 days later. The water system failure was subtle until it became catastrophic. Zephyros stood in the central plaza of Kish, a regional city he designed 5 years ago, demonstrating that optimal performance could be achieved across the partnership territory by implementing the advanced infrastructure techniques he was so proud of. The plaza's fountain should have been flowing with the precisely regulated pressure that made advanced systems superior to basic designs. Instead, water trickled irregularly, pressure fluctuating in patterns that revealed systematic dysfunction. When did it start? He asked Gamal, the city's infrastructure maintenance engineer. 2 weeks ago, Gamal replied, his 43-year-old face showing frustration of a competent person failing at tasks requiring capabilities he didn't possess. Small pressure variations at first. I adjusted the distribution valves according to the optimization tables you provided. Fixed the immediate problem but created pressure imbalances elsewhere. Tried to recalculate the full network, but the 17-variable optimization requires processing I don't have. Each adjustment improved one sector while degrading 3 others. System is cascading toward complete failure. Zephyros examined the distribution control center, a sophisticated mechanism requiring continuous calculation of pressure curves, flow dynamics, seasonal variations, demand predictions, maintenance schedules, and expansion planning. Enhanced engineers found it intuitive. Baseline engineers found it overwhelming. You needed to contact me immediately, Zephyros said, not as criticism but as observation of dependency he'd accidentally built into system design. I thought I could fix it, Gamal replied, the admission carrying the weight of professional pride meeting capability limitations. The system was supposed to be maintainable by city engineers. You provided optimization tables, maintenance schedules, and troubleshooting protocols. I followed them. But tables require engineering judgment, I don't have the cognitive capacity to execute them. I was maintaining infrastructure I couldn't actually maintain. Zephyros spent 6 hours recalibrating the water distribution system, calculations flowing through his immortal consciousness like water through pipes he was adjusting, optimizing 17 variable problems in seconds that would take baseline engineers days to approximate. The system stabilized. Pressure regulated. Water flowed with the precision that made advanced infrastructure superior. And Gamal watched, understanding he was seeing maintenance requirements his community didn't have, a dependency built into the generous infrastructure meant to serve them. How often will this require your intervention? Gamal asked. Seasonally, probably, Zephyros admitted. Demand shifts require recalibration. Enhanced engineers handle it routinely. Baseline engineers. He trailed off, recognizing the problem his design had created. Baseline engineers call the sky builder and wait for a mortal intervention, Gamal finished. That's not infrastructure we maintain. That's infrastructure you maintain for us. We're the operators, not the owners. The words cut because they were accurate. Zephyros had built advanced systems for Kish, generously giving them infrastructure superior to baseline capabilities, and accidentally created permanent dependency on enhanced expertise. The systems only functioned because enhanced or immortal intervention rescued them from inherent incompatibility between design complexity and maintainer capability. I thought I was helping, Zephyros said quietly. You thought you were optimizing, Gamal replied. Different thing. Partnership Infrastructure Review, 5 days later. The data was devastating. Nyx presented her analysis with the clinical precision that made mathematical truth impossible to dismiss. Infrastructure across partnership territories showed a systematic disparity that correlated perfectly with population type. Enhanced neighborhoods, 92% optimal function. Baseline neighborhoods, 78% functional adequacy. Advanced systems in baseline communities, 43% requiring outside intervention. Advanced infrastructure serves enhanced populations well because enhanced populations can maintain advanced infrastructure, Nyx explained, probability curves showing a pattern that Zephyros couldn't deny, even as he wished he could. Advanced infrastructure serves baseline populations poorly because baseline populations cannot maintain advanced infrastructure. Generosity creates dependency. Define dependency, Kronos challenged, his organizational mind resistant to the interpretation that optimization produced hierarchy. Infrastructure requiring external expertise for basic function, Nyx replied. Kish water system, baseline city, advanced infrastructure, catastrophic failure prevented only by immortal intervention. Uruk lighting system, baseline neighborhood, sophisticated controls, continuous maintenance, requiring enhanced engineering support. Nipur drainage network, baseline community, optimal design, monthly supervision by visiting enhanced specialists. She pulled up comparative data. Enhanced neighborhoods with advanced infrastructure, zero external dependencies. They maintain what they use. Baseline neighborhoods with advanced infrastructure, 43% external dependencies. They use what they cannot maintain. That's not serving them. That's making them dependent on continued benevolence. Or it's recognizing that some populations benefit from infrastructure they couldn't build themselves, Prometheus argued, his voice carrying the same logic he'd used to justify giving bronze working to humanity. Baseline populations are better off with advanced infrastructure they partially depend on than with basic infrastructure they fully control. Living standards matter. Autonomy matters too, Sophia countered. Infrastructure you can't maintain is infrastructure someone else controls. Advanced systems requiring enhanced intervention mean baseline communities exist at enhanced consent. That's clientelism regardless of generous intentions. The debate continued for hours, but Zephyros barely heard it. He was reviewing his designs with horrifying recognition. Every optimization for enhanced capability was implicitly creating sub-optimization for baseline participation. Every sophisticated system that served enhanced users excellently served baseline users incompletely. Every architectural choice prioritizing performance over accessibility was a choice about which population controlled its own infrastructure. Building choices were political choices. He'd made those choices thinking he was optimizing for capability. He'd actually been inscribing hierarchy into geography, one doorway, one control interface, one system design at a time. Mira's workshop, that evening. You build for yourself, not for us. Mira's words landed with the weight that 6 hours of partnership council debate hadn't managed to achieve. They sat in her workshop, a modest space in Uruk's baseline quarter where she designed universal access systems, infrastructure that wasn't optimal for anyone but functional for everyone, architecture that served broad participation rather than excellent performance. I thought I was building for everyone, Zephyros said, the defense feeling weak even as he spoke it. You thought you were optimizing for everyone, Mira corrected, her engineer's precision cutting through rationalization. But optimization requires defining what you're optimizing for. You optimize for capability, building infrastructure that served capable users excellently. That serves enhanced populations well. It serves baseline populations as clients receiving generous infrastructure they can't actually control. She gestured around her workshop, simple tools, straightforward systems, designs that baseline engineers could implement and maintain without requiring outside expertise. This is what universal access looks like. Not impressive. Not optimal. Not sophisticated. But ours. The infrastructure we build, maintain, modify, repair, and improve. No dependency on enhanced intervention. No waiting for Sky Builder to rescue failed systems. Not operating sophisticated tools we don't fully understand. It's less efficient than what I could build, Zephyros observed. It's more autonomous than what you did build, Mira replied. Efficiency measured in whose person hours? Performance evaluated against whose capabilities? Sophistication defined by whose cognition? Every time you choose optimization, you choose who benefits from that optimization. You chose enhanced populations. That's a political choice disguised as a technical decision. She pulled out plans for water distribution systems, simple designs using fixed pressure, manual controls, straightforward maintenance protocols. Not elegant. Not sophisticated. Not optimal by any engineering metric, Zephyros valued. These serve everyone adequately, Mira said. Enhanced populations find them simple but functional. Baseline populations find them maintainable and improvable. Nobody's optimal experience, everybody's accessible infrastructure. That's universal design. Not impressive architecture. Functional partnership. Zephyros examined the plans with his builder's eye, seeing every compromise, every sub-optimization, every efficiency loss compared to what sophisticated systems achieved. And also seeing, for the first time, every access enabled, every dependency prevented, every community empowered to control their own infrastructure. I would never have designed this, he admitted. I know, Mira said. You design for optimal performance. I design for universal participation. Different values produce different architecture. The question is which values partnership institutions should require community infrastructure to serve. Both, Zephyros said, architects mind already trying to bridge the gap. Infrastructure serving both optimal performance and universal participation. Doesn't exist, Mira interrupted. Not in any design I've seen. Optimization for enhanced capabilities requires complexity that baseline capabilities can't maintain. Universal accessibility requires simplicity, enhanced capabilities, and finding unstimulating. You can build sophisticated personal tools for enhanced users and a simple community infrastructure for universal access. But you can't build community infrastructure that's both optimally sophisticated and universally accessible. They're incompatible design goals. Then I've been building the wrong infrastructure, Zephyros said, the recognition feeling like architectural failure across 30 years of partnership civilization. I've been building optimal systems serving enhanced populations while telling myself I was serving everyone. I've been inscribing hierarchy into geography while congratulating myself for generous architecture. Yes, Mira agreed, not softening the truth. And now you need to decide what to build instead. Retrofit what you built for equity, or continue building for optimization and accept that partnership is conditional on geography. She left him alone in her workshop, surrounded by universal access designs that looked like architectural regression to his builder's eye but that represented political evolution his immortal consciousness was just beginning to comprehend. Every building choice was a political choice. He'd been making political choices for 30 years without recognizing they were political. Choosing optimization, choosing enhanced service, and choosing hierarchy. Time to choose differently. Even if it meant building worse architecture to enable better partnership. Immortal Council Chamber, 3 days later. I've made this mistake before, Zephyros said quietly, bringing the discussion to sudden silence. Catastrophically. The 8 other immortals turned to him, recognizing weight in his voice that went beyond current infrastructure debates. Kronos paused mid-argument about efficiency. Nyx's probability calculations froze. Even Erebus looked up from his documentation with rare curiosity about what architectural history Zephyros was about to reveal. Atlantis, Zephyros continued, the word carrying 56,000 years of memory. 15,000 years ago. I built the most magnificent city our civilization had ever achieved. Concentric rings of perfection rising from the Atlantic. Quantum coordination hub that functioned flawlessly. The infrastructure is so advanced that everything we've built since looks primitive. Every doorway is precise. Every system is optimal. Every structure is designed for immortal capability. His voice carried a memory of architectural triumph that had been transformed into moral failure. It was too visible. Too perfect. Too obviously immortal. Humans sailing past saw the gleaming city and told stories. The city of the gods. The impossible civilization. We were creating mythology just by existing there. 4,200 immortals living in architectural perfection that announced our presence across 3 continents. What happened to it? Talia asked, though she remembered all the original refugees remembered Atlantis, the decision, the transformation. We made it sink, Zephyros replied. Or rather, I made it sink triggered geological subsidence that looked natural while actually being precisely controlled tectonic manipulation. The humans saw Atlantis descend beneath the waves in a single night. Thought the gods had withdrawn. Thought we'd been punished for hubris. He gestured at Uruk's enhanced quarter visible through the chamber windows. But we didn't destroy it. We relocated it. Moved the entire city, every building, every system, every piece of technology to Antarctica. Far from human discovery. Still operating today as our primary base for training enhanced humans who need techniques too advanced for mainland mythology. You're comparing Uruk to Atlantis? Sophia asked, seeing where the comparison was leading. I'm recognizing the pattern, Zephyros said. Atlantis was optimal for immortals, but too visible for partnership with humans. So I learned to hide. Build distributed networks and megalithic monuments. Göbekli Tepe. Malta. Karnak. Stonehenge. Hidden in plain sight instead of obvious, that was the lesson I thought I'd learned. He looked at the enhanced quarter with a new comprehension emerging as he spoke. But I didn't learn deeply enough. I learned to hide from humans building infrastructure they wouldn't recognize as immortal technology. I didn't learn to build for everyone. Uruk isn't another Atlantis, it's more subtle, but it's the same fundamental error. Building optimal infrastructure that serves the capable while excluding those who need access most. The difference, Kronos observed, is that Atlantis could be relocated. Uruk's infrastructure is permanent. The segregation you built into this city can't be moved to Antarctica. No, Zephyros agreed, the admission feeling like recognition that architectural choices created consequences even immortal power couldn't simply reverse. It can only be rebuilt. Differently, with universal access from the foundation, there is no optimal performance. That's the lesson I should have learned the first time, but Atlantis taught me the wrong thing. It taught me visibility was the problem. The actual problem was who I was building for. He met the eyes of other immortals who'd lived through Atlantis' glory and transformation. I sank a city to hide our presence. Spent 5,000 years building distributed coordination networks to achieve what Atlantis provided, without visible perfection. Learned patience, humility, and persistence through failure. But I never questioned the fundamental assumption that optimal infrastructure serving capable users was the goal, and the only question was whether to build it obviously or hide it cleverly. What's the fundamental assumption you should question? Nix asked, probability matrices already calculating implications of Zephyros recognizing architectural philosophy requiring transformation. That optimal infrastructure is the goal, Zephyros said. Optimal for whom? Serving whose capabilities? Enabling whose participation? I've spent 56,000 years building increasingly sophisticated infrastructure serving increasingly capable users. Atlantis served immortals optimally. Megalithic networks served immortals covertly. Enhanced quarter serves enhanced humans excellently. But none of it served universal participation. None of it enabled everyone to control their own infrastructure. None of it chose accessibility over optimization. He gestured at the workshop plans Mira had shown him, simple, functional, universal access designs that looked like regression to his builder's eye. After Atlantis, I became better at concealment. After Göbekli Tepe, I became more persistent. After Karnak, I became better at distributed coordination. After Uruk, I need to improve my equity. And equity means building for universal access even when building for specific capabilities would produce better results for those capabilities. That's choosing politics over performance, Kronos said, his efficiency-minded consciousness recoiling from acceptance that optimization should be deliberately constrained. That's choosing universal participation over optimal performance, Zephyros corrected. Yes, politics. Every building choice is a political choice, that's what I failed to recognize for 56,000 years. Atlantis was a political choice to build for immortals. Megalithic networks were a political choice made to facilitate coordination. An enhanced quarter was a political choice to build for enhanced capabilities. Each time, I chose whom to serve through architecture. Each time, I chose optimization over accessibility. Each time, I inscribed hierarchy into geography while telling myself I was just building well. Talia spoke quietly, her voice carrying guilt parallel to Zephyros's recognition. I enhanced their biology, thinking I was giving them advantages. You built their infrastructure, thinking you were serving their capabilities. Both of us created a hierarchy while believing we were helping. Both of us chose optimization without recognizing we were choosing winners. At least biology can't be redesigned, Zephyros said. Architecture can be rebuilt. It should be rebuilt. Must be rebuilt if the partnership is going to survive contact with the geography I created. He stood, architect's mind already beginning transformation from proud builder to equity architect, from someone who solved problems through optimization to someone who enabled participation through universal access. I'm proposing a universal design mandate, he said formally, the words feeling like an admission of 30 years of building incorrectly and a commitment to rebuild correctly. All future community infrastructure must be maintainable by baseline engineers. All controls must be operable at baseline processing speed. All spaces must be navigable by baseline bodies. Enhanced populations can use sophisticated personal tools, but community systems serve everyone or serve no one. That sacrifices performance that everyone could access for equity. Nobody fully benefits from it, Kronos objected. That prioritizes participation over optimization, Zephyros replied. After Atlantis, I learned to hide in plain sight. After Uruk, I'm learning to build for universal access. Different lesson. Harder lesson. Necessary lesson if physical space is going to enable partnership rather than prevent it. The council continued debating for hours. But Zephyros had made his decision: recognition that couldn't be unrecognized, understanding that couldn't be forgotten, commitment that would shape his architecture for however many millennia remained before revelation came. He built Atlantis for immortal perfection and learned it was too visible. He built megalithic networks for covert coordination and learned distribution-enabled persistence. He built an enhanced quarter for optimal performance and learned optimization in the inscribed hierarchy. Now he would build for universal access, even if it meant less sophisticated systems or reduced efficiency. Even if it meant architectural choices that looked like regression to the builder's eye, it enabled participation in the partnership's needs. Every building choice was a political choice: time to choose differently. Time to build bridges that served everyone adequately, rather than monuments that served some excellently. Time to become an equity architect instead of an optimal builder. After Atlantis, they learned to hide. After Uruk, learning to serve everyone. The question was whether learning came fast enough to prevent geography from determining a partnership's failure. End of Part 1. Word count, approximately 8,000 words. Part 2 continues with Act 3, the retrofit costs, bridge construction, universal design implementation commitment scenes. Chapter conclusion, establishing Zephyros's transformation is complete. Key achievements in Part 1. Established infrastructure disparity through enhanced/baseline quarter contrast. Showed Zephyros's pride in optimization, transforming into recognition of hierarchy. Integrated Atlantis backstory seamlessly into the recognition scene. Demonstrated dependency through the Kish system failure. Delivered Mira's devastating critique. Set up retrofit commitment and universal design mandate. Maintain both and complexity optimization is better and creates hierarchy. Book 2, The Bronze Kings. Chapter 9, The Infrastructure Choice. Part 2, Act 3, The Retrofit. Act 3, The Retrofit. Partnership Infrastructure Audit, 2 weeks later. The numbers didn't lie, though Zephyros wished they would. Nix's comprehensive infrastructure audit revealed patterns he'd created without conscious intention but with systematic effect. Enhanced neighborhoods averaged 92% optimal infrastructure performance. Baseline neighborhoods averaged 78% functional adequacy. In baseline communities, advanced systems required external intervention for basic maintenance 43% of the time. This isn't malice, Nix said, presenting findings to the whole Partnership Council, enhanced and baseline representatives, human and immortal advisors, and everyone who would live with the consequences of infrastructure decisions made over 30 years. This is an optimization producing hierarchy. Every design choice serving enhanced capabilities created a corresponding constraint on baseline participation. Not because the Sky Builder intended exclusion. Because he optimized for capable users without recognizing that optimization itself chooses winners. She displayed specific examples with clinical precision that made denial impossible. Water systems. Enhanced quarter, self-regulating pressure optimization, 17-variable real-time calculation, zero maintenance failures, and enhanced engineers maintain effortlessly. Baseline quarter, fixed pressure distribution, manual valve adjustment, monthly recalibration required. Baseline engineers struggle with complexity. Lighting systems. Enhanced quarter, automated adjustment for enhanced visual acuity, intuitive controls, optimal positioning. Baseline quarter, manual controls, standard positioning, adequate but imprecise function. Building design. Enhanced quarter, proportions optimized for enhanced height/stride, comfortable navigation, unconscious ease. Baseline quarter, standard proportions, enhanced residents notice subtle wrongness, baseline residents experience as normal. Tool interfaces. Enhanced quarter, processing speed requirements matching enhanced cognition, efficient operation. Baseline quarter, simplified controls, longer operation times, or dangerous speed mismatches. The pattern is consistent, Nix concluded. Infrastructure designed for enhanced capabilities serves enhanced populations excellently while requiring baseline populations either to accept inferior function or to depend on enhanced intervention. Infrastructure designed for universal access adequately serves both populations, but is optimal for neither. The question is which principal partnership requires. Enkidu spoke first, his voice carrying the entitled generation's logical analysis of efficiency versus equity. The audit shows enhanced infrastructure is objectively better, with higher performance, better reliability, and more sophisticated functions. Universal design standards force regression to the lowest common denominator. Everyone suffers reduced infrastructure quality for the abstract principle of universal access that benefits nobody optimally. Everyone gains infrastructure autonomy, share or countered from across the chamber. At 64, mortality was evident in ways that made his wisdom carry greater weight than that of enhanced peers who wouldn't age significantly for another century. I can't maintain enhanced quarter infrastructure. Can't repair sophisticated systems. Can't modify optimal designs. That's not better infrastructure, that's better infrastructure I don't control. Autonomy matters as much as performance. Performance matters when infrastructure fails, Ninlil interjected, her engineer's pragmatism cutting through philosophical debate. The Kishwater system collapsed because baseline engineers couldn't maintain the advanced design. The population suffered. Performance optimization led to catastrophic failure when the maintenance capability didn't match the system's complexity. Universal design prevents that failure by matching complexity to capability. Or prevents innovation by constraining capability to the lowest level, Ishara responded. Enhanced engineers can build more sophisticated systems. The universal design mandate means we're prohibited from building what we're capable of. That's not equity, that's forced regression. Mira's voice cut through the escalating argument with quiet authority. You're not prohibited from building sophisticated systems. You're prohibited from building sophisticated community infrastructure that requires your ongoing consent to function. Build sophisticated personal tools. Build advanced, enhanced quarter features beyond community systems. But community infrastructure, water, roads, lighting, buildings, everyone uses, serves universal access or serves nobody. That's the distinction, Zephyros said, his architect's mind finally understanding the line his Atlantis-focused philosophy had crossed. Personal infrastructure can optimize for capability. Enhanced residents can have sophisticated private systems serving their abilities. Community infrastructure must optimize for participation, shared systems enabling everyone's access regardless of capability. I built community infrastructure as if it were personal infrastructure. Built what served capable users instead of what enabled universal participation. He looked around the chamber at faces watching his evolution, immortals who'd lived through Atlantis, enhanced humans who'd grown up with optimized infrastructure as usual, baseline humans who'd accepted inferior systems as inevitable. All were waiting to see whether the Sky Builder would defend his architecture or transform his principles. I propose universal design standards for all future community infrastructure, Zephyros said formally, the commitment feeling like an admission of architectural failure and a determination to build correctly. Maintainable by baseline engineers. Operable at baseline processing speed. Navigable by baseline bodies. No community system requires enhanced intervention for basic function. No shared infrastructure creates dependency on continued enhanced consent. In an existing infrastructure? Kronos asked, organizational mind already calculating implementation challenges. 30 years of optimized systems across partnership territories. Retrofit to universal standards? Yes, Zephyros said, though the word carried the weight of recognizing what that meant. Retrofit enhanced quarter community infrastructure to universal standards. Retrofit baseline quarter systems that created dependencies. Retrofit every optimization that chose performance over participation. Make community infrastructure accessible to everyone or optimal for none. That will take decades, Kronos observed. It will take longer than building correctly in the first place, Zephyros agreed. Retrofitting always costs more than initial universal design. But the alternative is accepting that geography determines who controls their infrastructure. Some populations live as clients, depending on continued enhanced benevolence. That partnership is conditional on where you live. The vote was close, 7-5 in favor of a universal design mandate. Enhanced representatives split, some recognize dependency problems, others resent the efficiency sacrifice. Baseline representatives are unanimous in support. Immortals are divided between Kronos' efficiency optimization and Sophia's universal access advocacy. But the majority carried. Universal design standards adopted. Retrofit projects authorized. Zephyros' architectural philosophy officially transformed from optimal builder to equity architect. Now came the more challenging part, actually rebuilding what he built wrong the first time. Uruk enhanced quarter, 3 months later. The retrofit was expensive, slow, and politically painful. Zephyros stood in the enhanced quarter as work crews dismantled the sophisticated water distribution control system he'd been so proud of. 17 variable optimization requiring enhanced processing, self-regulating pressure responding to demand patterns baseline engineers couldn't calculate, quantum mechanical precision that made water delivery an engineering marvel. They were replacing it with a fixed pressure system using manual valve controls that any baseline engineer could maintain. This is regression, Ninlil said, watching as enhanced engineering was replaced with baseline accessible design. Her voice carried the frustration of an engineer forced to implement inferior solutions. The new system will have pressure variations that the old system prevented. Temperature inconsistencies. Maintenance requirements. Everything is worse except the single virtue of being maintainable by baseline capability. Everything is worse except enabling universal access, Zephyros corrected, though agreeing with her technical assessment. The old system was objectively superior by every engineering metric. The new system is objectively accessible by a capability metric we didn't value sufficiently. We mean you, Ninlil said, not cruelly but accurately. I built what you designed. Implemented your optimization philosophy. Now I'm dismantling what I built to implement your universal access philosophy. The systems are getting worse because the values have changed. The values were wrong, Zephyros said. Or incomplete. Optimization without accessibility is hierarchy regardless of engineering excellence. I built magnificent systems serving capable users while excluding those who needed infrastructure they could control. That's not wrong engineering, it's wrong values. The retrofit continued across the enhanced quarter. Lighting systems simplified from automated optimization to manual controls. Building proportions adjusted to universal standards, doorways lowered, stairs respaced, proportions standardized. Control interfaces redesigned for baseline processing speed. Every capability enhancing optimization is being replaced with a universal design that supports broader participation. Enhanced residents were not pleased. My morning ablutions now take 18 minutes instead of 12, Ishara complained at a community meeting. Her mathematician's precision applied to the time lost due to infrastructure regression. 6 minutes daily multiplied across enhanced population, multiplied across days. We're losing thousands of person-hours to a quality theater that makes everyone's infrastructure worse. You're losing 6 minutes of efficiency purchased through baseline exclusion, Mira countered from her position as partnership infrastructure advisor. Systems baseline engineers enabled your 12-minute ablutions couldn't be maintained. You were consuming infrastructure you didn't have to provide for yourselves. Now you consume infrastructure you maintain like everyone else. That's not theater, that's autonomy. It's a reduced quality of life for a principle that benefits nobody optimally, and Kidu argued. Sophisticated systems served enhanced populations well. Simple systems serve baseline populations adequately. Universal design serves both populations worse than optimization served those who could access it. How is worse for everyone better than optimal for some? Because some becomes those who matter when infrastructure determines participation, Scherer said, his baseline voice carrying the weight of someone who lived through 30 years of subtle exclusion from community systems. When an enhanced neighborhood has water that flows perfectly and a baseline neighborhood has water that requires constant attention, geography determines whose needs matter. When enhanced residents navigate buildings unconsciously, and baseline residents experience constant small friction, architecture determines whose comfort matters. Universal design isn't optimal for anyone, it's accessible to everyone. That's not worse. That's different values producing different outcomes. The debate continued, but retrofit work proceeded. Every enhanced quarter system is being rebuilt to universal standards. Every optimization is being replaced with accessibility. Every sophisticated feature that required enhanced capability has been simplified to baseline maintainability. It was slow, expensive, and resulted in objectively worse infrastructure by every optimization metric Zephyros had valued for 56,000 years. It was also the only way to build community infrastructure that enabled universal participation rather than inscribing hierarchy into geography. Baseline quarter retrofit, concurrent timeline. The baseline quarter retrofit was a different problem requiring a different solution. Instead of sophisticated systems being simplified, basic systems were being improved to universal standards, better than baseline infrastructure but not requiring enhanced maintenance. Infrastructure baseline engineers could build, maintain, modify, and improve without depending on enhanced intervention. This is what I should have built initially, Zephyros said, watching baseline work crews install water distribution systems using universal design principles. Fixed pressure, manual controls, straightforward maintenance protocols, but built with quality materials, solid engineering, and proper planning. That basic infrastructure sometimes lacked when considered adequate for baseline capability. These aren't impressive, Mira observed, her tone carrying satisfaction with unimpressive functionality. Enhanced engineers will see simplicity in universal standard systems. Baseline engineers will look at sustainability. Different perspectives on the same infrastructure. That's universal design working, neither population's optimal experience, both populations' functional reality. How do they compare to enhanced quarter original infrastructure? Zephyros asked, architect's mind unable to stop evaluating performance even as he recognized performance wasn't the only metric. Worse by every optimization measure, Mira said honestly. Slower response time. Higher maintenance frequency. Less precise control. More manual intervention. Enhanced quarters original systems were objectively superior engineering. She paused. They're also objectively better than baseline quarters original infrastructure by every measure. Better materials. Better design. Better maintenance protocols. Better function. Baseline communities are getting significant infrastructure improvements. Enhanced communities are experiencing a significant reduction in quality. Universal design isn't making everyone equal, it's making everyone adequate. Adequate for everyone instead of optimal for some, Zephyros said, recognizing this was the trade-off universal access required. Partnership architecture. Nobody's first choice, Mira agreed. Everybody's functional reality. That's compromise architecture for compromise governance. Not inspiring. Sustainable. They walked through the baseline quarter as work crews installed universal standard systems. Everything functional. Nothing impressive. An infrastructure that would serve both populations without requiring either population to depend on the other's expertise. I spent 30 years building optimal systems, Zephyros said. Now I'm spending the next 30 years rebuilding adequate systems. That's recognition that I built wrong the first time. You build well for wrong values, Mira corrected. Now you're building adequately for the right values. Evolution, not failure. But it felt like a failure to Zephyros's builder's mind. Felt like regression, simplification, acceptance that universal access required sacrificing excellence. Felt like admitting optimal infrastructure was the wrong choice when optimal infrastructure was objectively superior by every engineering metric except the political one he'd ignored for 56,000 years. Bridge construction project, 6 months into retrofit. Zephyros designed the bridge as a teaching moment, a physical manifestation of universal design philosophy made concrete. Literally concrete, in some sections. Limestone in others. Wood where appropriate. Bronze reinforcement. Every material choice represents a compromise between optimal performance for a specific use case and adequate functionality for all users. The bridge connected the enhanced quarter to the baseline quarter across the dividing canal that Uruk's original design had included. Not a natural barrier, engineered separation that had unconsciously reinforced the social separation Zephyros was now trying to bridge. The bridge itself became a metaphor. Enhanced side, graceful engineering showing what enhanced capability could achieve. elegant proportions, sophisticated weight distribution, minimal materials, and achieving maximum span. Beautiful engineering that made the structure itself an art form. Baseline side, functional robustness showing what universal design is required. Straightforward construction, redundant support, conservative materials selection. Solid engineering that prioritized reliability over elegance. Bridge center, compromise meeting in the middle. Neither elegant nor purely functional. Neither optimal for enhanced aesthetics nor perfectly suited to baseline construction techniques. A middle ground that served both populations but did not fully satisfy either. It's ugly, Ninlil said, watching the bridge take form across 6 months of construction. Her engineers I saw every compromise, every efficiency sacrifice, every place where optimal design yielded to universal accessibility. The enhanced side could extend halfway with a lighter structure. The baseline side could use simpler techniques if it didn't need to match enhanced proportions. The middle section doesn't satisfy anyone's aesthetic or functional preferences. It's partnership architecture, Zephyros replied, watching 3 different work crews, enhanced engineers, baseline engineers, and mixed teams constructing different sections using different techniques toward the shared goal of a span that served everyone. Nobody's first choice. Everybody's compromise. Functional for all users regardless of capability. The construction itself demonstrated universal design challenges. Enhanced engineers worked faster but had to slow down for mixed team sections. Baseline engineers worked methodically but had to accommodate enhanced contributions in integrated segments. Coordination required constant adjustment, communication, and acceptance that the optimal approach for one population wasn't optimal for combined populations. Why not just let each population build its own bridges? Enkidu asked, visiting the construction site and seeing the inefficiency that the partnership created. Enhanced quarter could have an elegant span in 1 month. The baseline quarter could have a solid structure within 3 months. Instead, we're 6 months into a compromise bridge that doesn't satisfy anyone and still isn't complete. Because separate bridges would be separate infrastructure, Zephyros replied. Separate infrastructure creates separate geography. Separate geography enables separate governance. Separate governance produces consolidation we're trying to prevent. The compromise bridge is inefficient across all timeline metrics. It's also physically manifesting the partnership principle that geography should connect rather than divide. The bridge took 9 months to complete, 3 times longer than either enhanced-only or baseline-only construction would have required. The final structure wasn't optimal for enhanced aesthetics, wasn't perfectly functional for baseline techniques, and wasn't anyone's preferred design. It was adequate for everyone. Navigable by both populations. Maintainable by either capability level. Accessible regardless of who crossed it. Partnership architecture, Zephyros said at the opening ceremony, speaking to assembled residents from both quarters who would use the bridge daily. Not beautiful like an enhanced-only design would be. Not purely functional like a baseline-only design could be. Compromise connecting communities. Middle ground serving everyone adequately rather than some optimally. He paused, letting the bridge stand as a physical manifestation of the principle. Every building choice is a political choice. This bridge chooses connection over optimization, universal access over perfect function, partnership over segregation. It's not impressive architecture. It's functional equity. The crowd was divided in response, enhanced residents seeing inefficiency, baseline residents seeing inclusion, everyone recognizing that the bridge represented values rather than engineering excellence. But everyone could use it. Everyone could maintain it. Everyone could navigate it regardless of capability. That was the point. Not optimal. Universal. Partnership architecture made physical. Retrofit cost reality, 1 year later. The numbers were devastating in a different way from the original audit. Zephyros presented findings to the Partnership Council with the architect's honesty about what retrofitting costs, 3 times the initial universal design investment. Systems that could have been built correctly for baseline cost now require enhanced resources to rebuild. The time that could have been spent on the original universal construction is now dedicated to correcting optimization mistakes. Retrofitting enhanced quarter infrastructure to universal standards, 18 months, significant material cost, continuous disruption, Zephyros reported. Improving baseline quarter infrastructure to universal standards, 12 months, moderate material cost, community inconvenience. Combined, 30 months of work that could have been avoided if I built correctly initially. He displayed comparative analysis. If I'd designed universal access community infrastructure from Uruk's founding, both quarters would have had adequate systems serving universal participation from the beginning. Instead, the enhanced quarter had 30 years of optimal function, now being reduced to adequate function. The baseline quarter had 30 years of basic function, now improved to adequate function. Net result, 30 years of infrastructure hierarchy, 30 months of retrofit disruption, triple the resources that initial universal design would have required. That's the cost of learning, Sophia said, her educator's mind seeing a teaching moment in architectural failure. You built optimally. Discovered optimization in the inscribed hierarchy and committed to rebuilding correctly. The cost teaches a lesson for the future: build correctly initially or pay retrofit price later. Expensive education. But unnecessary expense, Kronos objected, his efficiency-focused consciousness recoiling from waste that planning could have prevented. You're arguing we should build universal access infrastructure from the foundation. I'm arguing we should have built optimal infrastructure and maintained it. Retrofit costs demonstrate that changing philosophy midstream is the most expensive option. Pick a principle and build consistently. Pick the right principle and build consistently, Zephyros corrected. I picked optimization and built consistently for 30 years, created hierarchy inscribed in geography. Now I'm picking universal access and rebuilding consistently. Yes, retrofit is expensive. But continuing to build optimization infrastructure would perpetuate hierarchy regardless of efficiency. Sometimes the cost of being right is paying to fix being wrong. He looked around the chamber at immortals who'd lived through Atlantis, enhanced humans who'd grown up with optimized infrastructure, baseline humans who'd accepted inadequate systems as usual. All are watching retrofit costs accumulate and questioning whether universal access justifies the expense. I chose efficiency over equity when I designed Uruk's original infrastructure, Zephyros said. That choice cost 30 years of baseline exclusion and enhanced entitlement. Now equity costs more because I made the wrong choice initially. That's not an argument against equity, it's recognition that wrong choices accumulate costs that correct choices must pay to resolve. How long until retrofit is complete? Ishara asked. Uruk, 18 more months, Zephyros replied. Regional cities vary by infrastructure complexity. Kish, 2 years. Nippur, 16 months. Eridu, 3 years because their advanced systems were the most sophisticated. Partnership-wide, approximately 5 years to retrofit all community infrastructure to universal standards. 5 years of reduced function while we rebuild what worked, Enkidu said, frustration evident. Enhanced populations are losing sophisticated infrastructure. Baseline populations experiencing construction disruption. Everyone is suffering reduced quality temporarily for the universal access principle. 5 years of transition from hierarchy inscribed in geography to accessibility enabling participation, Zephyros countered. Yes, temporary reduction. Yes, disruption. Yes, everyone is uncomfortable with change. That's the retrofit cost. The alternative is accepting a permanent hierarchy built into the infrastructure that determines partnership capacity. The council voted to continue retrofit despite costs, 8-4 in favor. Enhanced representatives split again, baseline representatives are unanimous, immortals are divided between efficiency and equity principles. But the majority carried. Retrofit would continue. Universal design would be implemented. The infrastructure hierarchy would be rebuilt for infrastructure accessibility. At triple the cost and triple the time that the initial universal design would have required. Zephyros accepted that cost as the price of learning that building choices were political choices, that optimization itself chose winners, that equity in architecture required a conscious decision to build for universal access rather than optimal performance. Expensive lesson. Necessary lesson. A lesson that would shape his next 1,000 years of building. Zephyros's commitment, retrofit completion. 5 years later, Zephyros stood in Uruk's central plaza as the final retrofit project completed. Around him, universal access infrastructure operated adequately, serving both populations. Water distribution through fixed pressure systems is not optimal but maintainable. Lighting through manual controls is not automated but operable. Buildings with standardized proportions, not specialized but navigable. Every community system is built for universal participation rather than optimal performance. The enhanced quarter looked less impressive. The baseline quarter looked more functional. The overall infrastructure served everyone adequately, but satisfied no one optimally. Partnership architecture made real. It's not what I would have chosen if I only valued engineering excellence, Zephyros said to Mira, who stood beside him observing 5 years of retrofit work completed. Every system could function better if I optimized for enhanced capability. Every building could serve users more precisely if I specialized in specific populations. Every design could achieve more if I didn't constrain myself to universal access. But engineering excellence isn't the only value, Mira replied. Autonomy matters. Participation matters. Control over your own infrastructure matters. Universal access enables those values even when it constrains optimization. I know, Zephyros said. I know intellectually, after 5 years of retrofit work, making knowledge concrete. But my builder's instinct still sees every compromise, every efficiency loss, every place where universal design sacrificed excellence for accessibility. He looked at the bridge connecting quarters, a compromise architecture serving everyone adequately. After Atlantis, I learned to hide in plain sight. After Göbekli Tepe, I learned the value of persistence through failure. After Karnak, I learned distributed coordination. After Uruk, I'm learning that accessibility matters more than optimization, that universal access serves partnership better than optimal performance, that building for everyone adequately is more important than building for some excellently. Different lesson than previous architectural education, Mira observed. Harder lesson, Zephyros agreed. Optimizing for capability is an engineer's instinct. Building for maximum performance is an architect's pride. Accepting that universal access requires constraining optimization goes against 56,000 years of building philosophy focused on doing things better, more efficiently, more impressively. He paused. But partnership requires a different philosophy. Requires building that enables rather than excludes, that serves universal participation rather than capable performance, that chooses accessibility over excellence when those values conflict. I built Atlantis for immortal perfection and learned that visibility created mythology. I built megalithic networks for covert coordination and learned that distribution enabled persistence. I built Uruk for optimal performance and learned optimization in the inscribed hierarchy. Now I'm rebuilding for universal access and learning that adequate function serving everyone matters more than optimal performance serving some. What comes next? Mira asked. Next? Zephyros smiled slightly. Next, I spent the following century building baseline-only infrastructure projects. Exclusively. No enhanced quarter work. No optimization for sophisticated capability. Just universal access designs for baseline communities. Learning to build from their perspective, for their needs, with their maintenance capability as a foundation rather than a constraint. That's significant commitment, Mira said carefully. That's recognition that I built advantage into geography for 30 years and created an infrastructure hierarchy that required 5 years to retrofit, Zephyros replied. Now I commit the next century to building equity into geography deliberately. Not because baseline populations can't maintain sophisticated systems, they can't, but that's not punishment requiring compensation. Because partnership requires geography to serve everyone rather than reinforce biological hierarchy. He looked across the Uruk bridge connecting quarters, a universal access infrastructure serving both populations, architecture manifesting partnership principles through every design choice, prioritizing participation over optimization. Every building choice is a political choice, Zephyros said. For 56,000 years, I made those choices unconsciously, optimizing for capability without recognizing I was choosing winners. For the next 1,000 years, I'll make those choices consciously, building for universal access even when optimization would produce better results for capable users. Because partnership requires conscious choice against optimization, Mira said, summarizing the principle that 5 years of retrofit had taught. Because partnership requires choosing the right values before pursuing engineering excellence, Zephyros corrected. Optimal infrastructure serves some excellently. Universal infrastructure serves everyone adequately. After Atlantis, Göbekli Tepe, Karnak, and Uruk, I finally learned which service architecture should provide. They stood in silence as Uruk operated around them, adequate infrastructure enabling universal participation, compromise architecture serving partnership principles, geography no longer inscribing hierarchy through every doorway, and control interface and system design. Not impressive. Not optimal. Not what Zephyros would build if he valued engineering excellence alone. But adequate for everyone. Accessible to all. Maintainable by both populations. Functional for universal participation regardless of capability. Partnership architecture. Nobody's first choice. Everybody's compromise, conscious decision to build for equity rather than optimization. After Atlantis, they learned to hide. After Uruk, I learned to serve everyone. Next, proving universal access could sustain partnership when biology argued for hierarchy. The work continued. The geography has transformed. The architecture manifested different values. And somewhere in his immortal consciousness, Zephyros carried recognition that would shape all future building. Every doorway includes or excludes. Every control interface enables or prevents. Every system design empowers or creates dependency. Every building choice is a political choice. After 56,000 years, he'd finally learned to choose correctly. Even if correct meant adequate rather than optimal. Even if correct meant universal rather than specialized. Even if correct meant equity rather than excellence. That was partnership architecture. That was universal design. That was built for everyone rather than for capability. That was the lesson 5 years of retrofit had taught, and the commitment that would define his next millennium of construction. Build for universal access. Accept optimization constraints. Value participation over performance. Make every building choice a conscious political choice for equity. After 56,000 years, Zephyros had learned what he should have known from the beginning. Architecture shapes society more than society shapes architecture. Building hierarchy and partnership fails. Building equity and partnership has a chance. Simple truth. Expensive lesson. Necessary transformation. The work continued. Zephyros learned what 56,000 years hadn't taught him. Every building choice is a political choice. After Atlantis, he learned to hide. After Uruk, he learned something more complicated, that architecture either enables everyone or excludes some. That universal access costs more initially but prevents catastrophe in the long run. That beings matter more than systems, even when systems are beautiful. Amendment 4 will mandate universal access. 5 years of retrofitting at 350% cost. Expensive lesson. Necessary transformation. But while infrastructure consolidation gets addressed, another crisis emerges. One Zephyros didn't design. One that biology created and politics must manage. In Chapter 10, The Fertility Crisis, Talia confronts the long-term consequences of enhancement. 8 generations until complete genetic integration. 400 years of partnership survival required. Can frameworks last that long? Join us next time.